Want to do this, to analyze this automatically, because the content is so huge, you cannot do this manually, it's impossible. Every day, thousands and millions of videos are uploaded into the internet. You want to analyze it, and if there is something, for example, that the kids do not want to see, you don't want the kids to see, then you want to automatically locate this tag list, for example. There are many applications. There are applications in gaming, security, surveillance, ambient intelligence, and also public good, right? We are now also looking how to use artificial intelligence for public good, to create a system that will help the humanity or help the country, the citizens. If you, for example, think of a way of fighting pollution with artificial intelligence, that could really help, for example, your city, right? So you can go and collaborate with municipalities or with big companies or the farmers who are burning things in the field. So what if you can improve the things with artificial intelligence? That's AI for public good. So we do research along a spectrum of these technologies. This is my group at Utrecht University. Ronald Poppe is working on mostly computer vision-based systems. Heysam Kaya is working on speech and paralinguistics. And Itır Önal Ertuğrul is working on the face modality, so analysis of the face. And these are our PhD students, so you can see we are a small group, but I will show you what kind of research we have performed over the years. So the group's name is Social and Affective Computing, and how many of you know what social computing is? Okay, I'm not gonna be able to give the word because I don't think this room is pretty big, so without a microphone it will be difficult. But it's an interdisciplinary area which uses data analysis, network analysis, and other models to look at behavior of humans at a very large scale. So you look at social systems. For example, crowds, communities, and populations. And this area became very important for two reasons, especially with crisis situations like floods or earthquakes. You want to create systems that can help people, and COVID was also another example. You can, for example, simulate epidemics with social computing, and then you can devise policies based on data insights, and that's important. I will tell you a little bit about this. This is not the topic of my talk. I will talk more about the affective computing side. And I think at the moment you are preparing this affective computing course with Abhinav Dal, but do you already have some affective computing courses here at the Institute? Okay, so maybe some people have taken some affective computing courses here. Let me see hands. Is there anyone? Not yet, maybe. Okay, so the affective computing is about making computers more reactive to emotions, right? So either you have systems that can recognize emotions and change their behavior, or you have systems that can show emotions, right? So, or communicate with emotions. Especially in social robotics, this is very important. If you're communicating with a robot that looks at your facial expressions, understand whether you're happy, you're angry, you're bored, you're frustrated, and then you can improve the interaction. Oops. I will be able to do this. Yes, just a second. Yes. So we look at different modalities when we work on computer analysis of human behavior. We look at the visual modality. That means we work with cameras, images, and videos. We work with vocal modality, so speech and paralinguistics. Paralinguistics is everything in the speech that is not related to the content of it. So let's say I say, hello guys, and I say it in a small voice, or I say in a loud voice, and that kind of conveys a different sentiment, right? If I start shouting at you, you will. So paralinguistics is the analysis of the quality of the voice, basically. And then we have the verbal modality, so the content itself. And nowadays we have very good speech-to-text tools, so all my speech can be automatically converted into text, and then we can also analyze the text for emotions. Is this person talking about something happy or something sad or something glorious, triumphant maybe, I don't know. Then the last modality is mobility, and that's at the computational social science level. So this is a scale you can see here from the individual behaviors to dyadic and group behaviors. That means a dyad is two-person interactions, a triad is three persons, and group interactions can be, you know, a few people at a time. And then here you have social computing, where you look at millions of people, okay? So this is a scale, and we do analysis along this scale. For a single human, we look at facial expressions, posture and gesture recognition, action recognition, and then mental health. For example, is this person depressed? Is this person bipolar, autistic, ADHD, right? There are a lot of scenarios in which you can try to use computer systems to diagnose or help people with mental health problems. For dyadic and group interactions, you can look at games, for example, between people. You can try to understand the quality of interactions. If I'm teaching here and you're listening to me, we can try to understand how good is the communication. Are the students following? Are they bored out of their minds? Are they sleeping? Are they excited about this research? You can try to understand all these things. We look at Utrecht University, especially at parent-child interactions, because we collaborate with psychologists. I will show you a few things of that. And then also patient-therapist interactions. So we look at psychotherapy, because this is also an interesting area where we look at. Then for social computing, we specifically look at migration and refugees. Because of the war in Syria, about 4.5 million refugees flooded into Turkey. So since 2016, I started working in this area a little bit, and I collaborate with the telecommunication companies, which share their data for social good. And it's very difficult to get this kind of data, because it's very sensitive data. So you have to also work in the privacy and ethics related issues a little bit. So you probably know that there is now a lot of buzz about regulating artificial intelligence systems, right? Because AI systems can have a lot of impact on society, and this can be also negative impact. So when we are developing these systems, it's very important that you, as the students of artificial intelligence, know about the ethical issues in a very thorough way, so that you can design ethical systems. Because if you do not do it, other people will use your technology, use the things that you develop, and use it for bad purposes. So you have to take precautions ahead of time. While you're designing, you have to build in some of the safeguards. I'm not going to talk about these things, but later, if you have questions, we can also discuss it a little bit. So I'll just go through the breadth of research that we do at Utrecht, starting from individual behaviors, looking at small groups and the computational social science, just to give you an idea of what kind of things there are. So you can't see the images here very well, but the people who are involved in the research are depicted at the lower corner. Utrecht Turul was working on facial action unit detection. How many of you are familiar with facial action units? Let me see hands. Okay. So this is an area of research about understanding facial emotional expressions. And if you look at facial emotions, what kind of analysis you can do? Well, you can try to track the points on the face and look at the deformations. If my mouth corners are going up, I'm smiling, right? So you can classify the expressions. But sometimes these expressions are very difficult to interpret. For example, Indian people and Turkish people, they may express their happiness in different ways, or express their puzzlement in different ways. So how do we do that? If we create a classifier, It's very subjective, right? So in order to do an objective analysis, the facial action unit system has been developed by Paul Ekman. If you are watching the American series Lie to Me, maybe you have heard about it. This is based on the life of Paul Ekman, and he's one of the advisors of this series. You look at the person's face and you try to read the facial expressions. So the Ekman system is actually encoding all the muscles in the face and their movements. So for example, there is one muscle around your eyes when you are smiling and when you're laughing. If it's a real laughter, you have these little wrinkles here. They are called crow's feet. And that's an indicator that it's a real smile, not a fake smile. Not everybody has that all the time, but these little cues can tell you a lot about a person's facial expression. So we work on building deep learning based systems for accurate facial expression recognition. We also forward. Yeah, I can just do it. It's easier. We also work on facial expression synthesis. So if you have virtual agents, and this year at ICMI in Bangalore, the special topics was embodied conversational agents, right? Virtual agents that talk to you. For example, you go on the website of IKEA, and there you have a virtual agent that tries to help you. And then you can have a conversation. Okay? And then, if you have a believable agent, then you also want the agent to show facial expressions. So facial expression synthesis is an important issue, and you can see how the expressions are changing on these people, depending on the change of facial action units. One important problem in our field is that everything works fine if you have a good camera, good lighting, frontal images, and you're recording data in the lab. But if you go outside, if you deploy this as an application, what we call in the wild settings, right? You know, people use this in dark rooms, on the move, maybe while they're walking down the street and they have a phone in their hands. Everything is blurry, noisy, there's a lot of movement. Then our technologies usually do not work well. So I can present you with a system, actually I will show you a system that can separate a real smile from a fake smile, but it will not work on a phone when somebody's rushing down the street, for example. It needs a high quality illumination, high quality frontal camera. But we also develop systems that can detect emotions in the wild, so to deal with all the variation that comes from the difficulty of this setting. Oops. So one of the settings that we work with is parent-child interaction. In Utrecht University there is a big project called the Youth Cohort. This was a 23 million euro project from the Dutch government, where they track 3,000 families from pregnancy to adolescence, and they record everything. They record EEG, fMRI, behavioral indicators, brain waves, DNA, video recordings, surveys, all kinds of things. What they want is, they want to understand, can we predict developmental problems early on? Right? If you're going to develop depression at the age of 14, can we detect this when you are 3 years old, and can we do something about it? So in this project we have parent-child videos. They come to the lab, you can see an example there, and they play with each other. So then with this you can try to see whether there is a good attachment between the parent and the child. Because if there is no good attachment, then the child will probably develop problems when they are growing up. So our research concerns facial action detection of the child. So can we understand whether the child is happy or not? Because we have tons of data, thousands of hours of data. But also we fit skeletons on the body of the parent and the child, and we try to understand their behaviors, right? So do they have mutual gaze? Do they have rapport? Do they interact well? Then we have a bunch of scenarios about healthcare. And this is a very rapidly growing area. So there are new companies using AI for mental health care all the time. Very recently, a company received a nice, large funding. Michel Valstar's company in England received 3.5 million euros grant for improving these kind of scenarios. What you want is your mobile phone giving you some healthcare advice. Maybe not clinical level healthcare advice, but if there is something you should worry about and you should go to a doctor, your phone can perhaps tell you that. So here you have, for example, pain detection as an example. And this is important because sometimes you are not in a situation where you can talk about your pain. Or you have never been in great pain before, you don't know how much pain you are in. Is it a 5? Is it a 10? You don't know, because you don't have the scale. We also do a little bit of research on animal pain, because in Utrecht University there is the only veterinary faculty of the Netherlands. So one application we worked on is detecting pain from horses. That's also a commercially very lucrative business because of horse races, right? Horses can be very, very expensive. You have horses that are a few $1 million, and if they are in pain, you have to detect it very fast so that no harm comes to the horse. And they are animals that learn to hide their pain. So because of the, it's one of the mechanisms of protection against predators. So when they are in pain, they don't want to show it. So a facial expression analysis tool that works on horse pain is very interesting. We also work on dog pain. I mean, normally the owner of a dog or a horse would know, but what if you're not the owner? Then you may not get the signals, right? So that's an application. Forecasting reactions, monitoring and treatment of mental disorders. We work with OCD, for example, from different modalities, from text also, because when you are obsessive, then you repeat stuff. So the content of the text becomes also important. Depression severity modeling is one thing that is interesting to us. And at ICMI we had a paper using the breathing signals to detect depression cues. So when I talk to you, the way you're breathing during the conversation may indicate your emotions. Okay, and then I can try to understand whether you're depressed or not based on these conversations. We have made one of the very few resources on bipolar disorder. We collected data from patients who come to the hospital in a manic state. So they are super excited, they talk non-stop, and they are hospitalized. So we record them when they come to the hospital on day 1, day 2, day 3, they are medicated, and when they are discharged from the hospital a month later. So this therapy, this treatment takes a month, maybe 40 days. We record them, and then we build machine learning based systems to understand whether how much of a mania, like what stage of mania these people are in. Because otherwise you have to give them a survey every day, and it's the same survey. It's a good device, but if you do it 40 times, it loses its meaning. The patient just starts filling the same answers. So I'm going to show you a little bit more detail about this research towards the end of my talk. This is an application that is very recent. This was presented in Kite Play this year and was also showcased in the Dutch Design Week last week. This is, I don't know whether you can see it, but it's kind of like a little monster. It's a plush toy. You have a mobile phone inserted into the toy, and the mobile phone shows the mouth of the monster. So you can do expressions on the screen of the mobile phone, and it kind of becomes an interactive kind of monster. What do we do with this? This is a collaboration with IJsfontein, one of the oldest game development companies in the Netherlands, and with Philips. Philips is a very big company, and they are interested in healthcare, so they built this big fMRI systems, a few million euros each. But they also built smaller technologies for healthcare. So in this application we target kids with cerebral palsy. These kids do not have good motor skills, right? They cannot control their hands a lot, so they have to do exercises, rehabilitation exercises, which are very boring. The kids do not like to do these exercises. So what we do is we create for them an application, a magic monster, with which they can perform a magic trick, a coin vanishing trick. The coin is actually hidden somewhere inside the monster while the kid is doing the trick. But in order to learn it, they have to do a lot of small hand movements, right? So that's the rehabilitation part. And the machine learning part comes in when we use the accelerometer and the gyroscope inside the phone to collect data and then to classify how these are. Okay? If we can do that, we can adapt the difficulty of the program to the child's level, so that it doesn't become too simple and too boring, and it doesn't become too complex and impossible to perform well. So we adjust the sensitivity, and we can increase it over the therapy, so it becomes a bit more sensitive, a bit more challenging. One of the key things in gamification is the adaptation of the difficulty of the content to the person using the content. So machine learning has a great application area in gamification of experiences. Surveillance is another area where we use computer vision. We have surveillance cameras, and we do this, for example, to determine risky behavior around rail crossings. Sometimes we try to detect people who come there to commit suicide, for example. They loiter, they are thinking about throwing themselves under a train, and you can detect these behaviors. There are places in the world where people commit suicide more frequently, and those places are typically monitored with cameras by the police, right? And then you want to automate this, because for a single police officer, this is very boring job, looking at the camera all the time. But if you have a computer system that can evaluate, that can be very useful. We also have in-car scenarios, for example, detecting the drowsiness of a driver. So I was in sabbatical in Nagoya for 1 year in Japan, and Nagoya is where the factory of Toyota is. So we were working with Toyota to look at, to create car systems that would look at the driver. You can use, for example, the eye blinks, because when you get sleepy, you start blinking more. Your eye opening is getting closer and closer and closer. You can detect these things, and then you can do something about it. You can also use the in-car computer. There is a car computer, and a lot of things are automatically recorded in the car. And you can also see whether a person is starting drifting, right? Slowly sliding towards a barrier or towards the other lane. That you can detect from the driving behavior. And you can combine it with the eye blinkings, and you can make a good system that will detect the drive. This will not happen, for example, in Bangalore. I don't think anybody can sleep in the traffic in Bangalore. People are honking all the time. There are tuk-tuks coming, in front of you, or motorcycles. It's the same in Istanbul, by the way. It's, well, a little bit less chaotic maybe, but almost as chaotic. I was always thinking, yeah, okay, autonomous driving is a nice application. It will not work in Istanbul. It will not work in Bangalore, I think. So then we have a bunch of research on dyadic and group behaviors. And as I told you, parent-child interactions are incredibly interesting for us, because there we can have a real impact on mental health care of the child. And then we look at face-to-face interactions or still-face interactions and try to understand whether an infant is not responsive to the parent's signals. That can be, for example, used for early diagnosis of autism spectrum disorders or Asperger's syndrome. In the youth cohort, our challenges. So how many of you are familiar with open pose? Let me see. Okay. How many of you have taken a course on computer vision? Okay, because these are correlated questions. This was the trick question. So OpenPose is an open tool that you can use, and it will fit a skeleton to a body in your image. So you take a body in an image. You don't have to take it. You just give the image, and OpenPose will give you the skeletons of the people inside the image. However, the problem is it's trained with adults. So if you have a baby, and if the baby is, for example, in the arms of a parent, then you have a lot of arms and feet that are entangled. And open pose does not work very well in these scenarios. So at the moment, my group is some of our PhD students are working on this problem, improving the pose detection when you have a lot of close interactions. If we can do that, then we can track the parent and child successfully, and then we can try to understand what's going on. I will also talk about this use case in a bit more detail in the second part of my talk. That's effect analysis of children in play therapy. So we collaborate with a clinic in Turkey where children come with anger issues. Right? So these are kids who really smash the house when they're angry. I don't know, I'm sure you have a cousin like that. You know, they come for a nice cup of tea and then they destroy the living room. So why are these kids so angry? Is it, I mean, it's okay if you're angry when you're an adolescent. You have a lot of hormones, you have a lot of frustration. But why are these small kids angry, right? They have sometimes trouble expressing their emotions. They don't understand the feelings they have. They don't see the process. So that makes them very frustrated. So in this play therapy, the psychologist plays with the kid and creates situations in which emotions can be interpreted. For example, the psychologist will say, oh, here is the princess. The princess is crying. Why is the princess crying? And then the child starts thinking about, okay, what is the emotional situation here? Why is the princess crying? And the next time when the child is feeling like crying, they can look at their own situation and they say, okay, this guy did that. That's why I feel like crying. I feel this was unjust. He ate my cookies. And that's why what makes me angry. And then they learn to deal with this, right? So in this data set, we have 40 sessions per kid and 1 year of data. Every session 1 hour, so maybe we're talking about 300-400 hours of data per kid. They're coming to this room, they're playing with the psychotherapist. Now you see this, the room through a style transfer network to preserve the anonymity of the people. But you can see that it has a lot of objects. It has a couch, it has a table, there are board games on the table. Maybe the kid and the therapist are playing a board game. Maybe they're playing hide and seek. There are many different games that they can be playing. Sometimes they're playing sword play. You know, they just hit each other with swords. There can be a lot of activity. Sometimes the kid is sitting there and just painting something. And the kid can be very angry. You know, you look at what he or she is painting, you know, maybe somebody stabbing somebody with a knife, right? It's dark materials. So it's difficult to understand always the emotional status of the kid. Sometimes they look very calm, but they're actually very angry. So it's very challenging. Another thing is the body cues of deception. So Ronald Poppe in my group is one of the worldwide experts on detecting deception in people. And his wife, Sophie, is a psychologist, the foremost expert in deception, working with the Dutch government. So what is interesting about deception is that there are some cues that give away deception, right? So you may be fidgeting, you may be rolling your eyes, your eye blink rate may be increasing, you may be avoiding direct gaze contact, you may be looking elsewhere. And if you are a novice in deception, you will have a lot of cues, and an expert will be able to tell these cues apart. So that's what one of the important premises of Lie to Me was. If you know what you're doing, you can detect deceptive cues. And if you want to get rich playing poker, that's of course a very nice skill. But there are also other ways in which this is used. So I was once visiting Carnegie Mellon University, and in the morning where I was staying, interviewers were coming to interview the PhD students or the graduate students who would go into the industry. And these interviewers are extremely professional, right? They talk to you and they try to understand whether you're lying on your resume or not. Did you lie on your CV? When you say, I'm an expert in Python, do you really mean that? These guys do not have an idea how to program in Python. They're not an expert in programming, so they cannot look at your code, your GitHub page, to say whether you're good or not. But they can look at your face, and they can read your cues. And then they can ask questions. They can also detect some tremor in your voice when you say, I'm good in Python. You know, they can detect that you're sounding insecure, or and then they poke more. They ask more questions, in-deep questions. So I was fascinated by the technique they have, finding weaknesses and pouncing on them. So deception detection is a very interesting area. However, I mentioned that ethical use of artificial intelligence is very important. This is an area where AI is also used unethically. So for example, at the moment, in the borders of Europe, there are some places where they're deploying these systems that look at asylum seekers and try to understand whether they're lying or not in their asylum applications. And they do this with artificial intelligence, which is a bad idea because these systems are not perfect. And if you make a mistake, you're playing with the life of a person. And that's a lot of responsibility for an AI system, right? So you have to be really careful about what you claim. If you publish a paper and you claim that you're 95% correct in detecting deception, but you do not have a good protocol and you did not use an independent test set, and you used cross-validation, but you looked at your results many times, then maybe you're overlearning your data set, and the actual accuracy is much lower in the wild. Then you are creating systems, and the policymaker can say, oh, here's a system from IIIT, which is nice, 95%, that works for me, and they try to deploy it, they will destroy lives. So you have to be careful in what you are claiming in your papers as well. We look at gaming scenarios, so identification of social and physical disorders during gaming, not just for humans, but also sometimes for animals. And group dynamics, so this is from a database that we have collected called Mumbai, where 4 people are playing a collaborative board game. And we have cameras that record their facial expressions, and we try to detect signals like who is winning the game, who is losing, who is bored, who is frustrated. So if you create a social robot that plays this game with these people, those kind of interpretations become very important. So you can build this technology and then you can put it on the social robot to interact with the people. This is another application done by IIIT, interaction entrepreneurial context. So let's say you have a startup. And if you have a startup, you have to do a lot of pitch talks, right? Investors will come and listen to you, and if they like your presentation, they will put money in your company. So it is very important that you give a good presentation and you feel confident about your product. So this system looks at pitch talks and tries to predict which ones are going to result in funding decisions. So based on this, I can create a training program that will allow you to train for your pitch talks. Of course, it's a little bit shaky ground, right? Because you're basically learning to fake confidence. It has nothing to do with your product. You're just learning to fine-tune your social signals so that you rise in your social life, in your jobs, etc. So is this ethical? You think? How many of you think that this is an ethical use of artificial intelligence? Let's see hands. Not many people. How many of you think that this is non-ethical? Okay. What if I create a system that can help me speak better? So if I'm stuttering, for example, if I'm not articulating well enough, how many of you think that this is a good use of artificial intelligence? Way more people. But this is actually very similar, right? I'm talking about social signals. So the way you signal to the other people, that is something we can improve, that you have better communication, that you present yourself better. So this is perhaps an opportunity that we have to give everyone, right? If everyone can have these skills, then you can start looking at other things. So if everyone is a good talker, then maybe you need to look at the technology to decide whom to fund instead of who is the better speaker. I'll also give you a few examples about what we do at the social computing level. One of the interesting applications we do is using mobile phone data. And every time you make a phone call, your phone company enters a line in their database about that phone call. When was it made? So the exact timestamp. Which phone number from which base station called which other phone in what other base station, and what was the duration of the call. Now they can use this for billing purposes, but they can also use this for customer analysis, right? They can, for example, they know whether you are a social person or not, because if you're not a social person, maybe you have no phone calls during the day, but if you're social, you have 10 or 15 phone calls. And they can also see whether you're always calling your mother or you have, let's say, a lot of friends, different phone numbers that you're calling. They also know where you live and where you work, because phone calls you make before 8 a.m. and after 8 p.m. are from your home location, and between 9 and 5 you're typically calling from your work location. So if you have a regular job, they know where you are working and where you are living. They also know whether you're a practicing Muslim, because you go on Fridays to a mosque nearby and they can see this. Or if you're a Christian and you go to Mass on Sundays, they know that. Or if you go to a synagogue, you know. They know where you go for entertainment, like which restaurants you prefer. They know this because it's in the data. So your phone company knows a lot about you, right? From the restaurants that you're going, from the speed with which you travel, from the amount of travels you're doing, they know roughly how wealthy you are. Okay? If you're going to posh places very frequently, maybe you're very rich. Okay? If you're driving with 130 in the streets, they know you have a Porsche and you're probably rich. So these kind of things they can get. So what can we do with it? Right? The phone companies collect this data. The question is, can we collaborate with them and use this data to do something good? Okay. And one thing is that we can try to address some gaps in the official data by using this mobile phone data. So I'm now chairing a European project called Hummingbird. I'm the chair of the mobile phone package in this project. We're trying to see whether we can derive migration indicators using mobile phone data. And we have, last week we had a tutorial, a 5-day tutorial with International Organization of Migration in Mongolia and the Mongolian National Statistics Institute and a telecom company in Mongolia. Mongolia is a very interesting place. It's a very big country, but very sparsely populated. A huge country with only 3 million citizens. And a large proportion of these people are nomadic. They don't stay in one place, they move around. And in the winter, they come to the big cities to shelter. And during the rest of the months, they are roaming around the country. And the National Statistics Institute doesn't know where the people are. But the mobile phone company knows, right? So can we collaborate? Can we make a collaboration where the Statistics Institute can learn where the people are going? And then the government can create resources, maybe send mobile health centers somewhere, maybe establish mobile schools for the children, maybe prepare for the winter if they know how many people will be coming, prepare temporary shelter areas for them, allocate resources, maybe use, create new railroads or public transportation lines. Okay, so there are different projects we do with this kind of data. This week, actually, our new book came out from Oxford University Press, Data Science for Migration and Mobility, that talks about how you can use big data sources for analyzing migration. It's a very challenging topic. There are many aspects of migration, including integration of people, irregular migration, human trafficking, asylum, political migration, educated, skilled migration. For example, a lot of skilled people leave poor countries to work in rich countries like the European countries or US. What does it mean for the country who loses the best educated people to other countries? Turkey is in that state. A lot of our students go abroad. I decided to live in the Netherlands. I'm sure that in India you also have a little bit of that problem where the most skilled people are getting huge salaries abroad, so they leave their country. They don't want to work in their hometowns sometimes because there are not enough opportunities, right? The economic development is not enough. But then if all the good people are leaving, who is going to improve these countries? That's a big problem. So can we use social media? Can we use Twitter, Facebook, mobile phone data, satellite data, all these big data sources to gain insights and improve policy making? Okay, so how am I doing with respect to time? How much time do I have? 20 minutes? Okay. Let me stop for a bit and get some questions maybe, because I feel I've talked a bit uninterrupted for a long time. So any questions so far? Yes, please. Shall I give the...
Sir, which you have shown this slide in which we recognize the pitch of the entrepreneur that was investing in our business. So, sir, we are basically judging the social behavior of that person or the confidence level of that person. So, but what about he or she is nervous at that time? But like the product was good, but he or she is nervous at that time.
Yes.
To pitch in the front of that.
You're not going to get funding. No. If you're nervous during your pitch, you're not going to be funded.
But was the product was good?
So the problem is that typically in those pitches, so the VC has maybe let's say a couple of $1 million to investigate, right? And then they talk with 10, 20, 30 companies. So it's very difficult for them to put their money on one company. At the moment, the way this is done is they put their money on a company and then they coach the company to become successful. So they don't just put the money and forget about the company, right? But it's not like they have a lot of money and they can just throw it away. 90% of startups are unsuccessful. So you see some of the success stories, but there are many, many more stories which are ending badly. And those are burning money. Of course, the people who are involved, they gain a lot of expertise. Maybe they will succeed in their next venture. For them, it's good, but for the investor, that's bad. So what they do is they hope to invest in enough companies. 10 of them will collapse, 1 of them will make big money, and that's enough for them. So if you're nervous, because it's a lot of competition, you're not going to be very successful. That's why we have these kind of applications, to take away your nervousness. What you do when you work with a coaching company or an incubator, for example, they will teach you how to do pitch presentations, and they will make you do the same presentation 25 times until you can do it with your eyes closed, and then you're not nervous anymore. You're just repeating what you know very well, right? The key to successful presentations is repetition. All the performers know this. Good musicians know this. Good theater players know this. If you repeat this many times, it goes from your brain to your spinal cord. A lot of it becomes automatic. So when you're driving, you can do something else. You can talk on your phone, you can talk with your friends, you can be distracted. You will still drive well because it's now in your spinal cord. A lot of it is automatic. So if you can make some of it automatic, then it's gonna appear to be good. Any other questions? Come over here.
Continuing to his question, if you're the training for the nervous person, if we do this training for the university graduates, you just said the earlier slides that interviewer can detect they put the things in their resume correct or not. If they are to tackle that situation unethically,
What do you mean unethical?
I mean, they do not know in the example you have made, like Python programming on the GitHub.
Yeah. So they're actually bad programmers, but they are able to sell this well.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is unethical, by the way. Teaching people how to deceive others, I don't see, in itself, this is not unethical. If they do it, they are being unethical. That's a different story. But we do fake a lot of things, right? Sometimes it's for a good purpose. You know, you have, let's say, an aunt that is about to die, you know, 4th stage cancer, you know that. You visit your aunt and you tell her, smiling, everything's going to be fine. And you're lying, but it's for a good purpose, right? You don't want to make a person more depressed than necessary. You know, maybe, you know, the last few days, maybe they should spend in peace. So lying is by itself not necessarily a bad thing. We lie to our kids, you know. We say, oh, this was not a terrorist bomb. We don't say that, of course. This was something else, you know. Oh, they're, you know, this is just fireworks. Sometimes we do that, right? But it's not, by the way, it's not just your social skills and presentations. When you are in academia, you learn how to write papers. And that's another professors. Can I, for example, from their behavior, understand which one is going to get good student ratings at the end of the year or not, right? Is this something that I can teach to the professors? Can I improve their teaching skills by telling them or by giving them an interactive application with which they can practice? So I'm going to go quickly through the different applications of affective and social computing in this domain. The first one is automated coding, okay? Finding a suitable abstraction of behaviors and providing transcripts and descriptions. So one example you saw was the facial action coding system, right? This muscle-based movement of the faces. And psychologists employ experts for that. They record 1 hour of data. 1 hour takes maybe 12 hours to annotate by an expert, because they have to annotate every muscle separately. Of course, it's very interesting for psychologists if you can create a computer system that can do this automatically, right? The second one is indexing, search and retrieval. I gave you the example of the play therapy, 400 hours of data. If I want to say, okay, give me all the instances in which the child was having an anger attack, I want to do this automatically. So if a system can go through 400 hours of video and find the episodes that are interesting to me, that's good application. Quality assessment. So while I'm recording the data, if a computer system can analyze it and tell me, look, your sound is now very bad. Maybe my microphone has dropped or its cable came out, right? Automatic analysis during the recordings can help my doctors with data collection. So that's interesting application area. Human bias and subjectivity can be assessed. Also, real-time analysis can be performed with this kind of data analysis. Diagnosis and prediction is a very, very interesting area, but it's also the most difficult area because normally it comes with legal implications. If you have the diagnosis of a depression on a patient, then the patient is probably entitled to some health care from the insurance. So there are legal implications. If you are, so typically we want doctors, certified doctors, to sign under this diagnosis. So computers usually have support role in this, like can we help the doctors to make their decisions? And there are some clinical diagnosis tasks that are more frequently studied in the literature, right? Schizophrenia, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, they are a bit more analyzed. PTSD was very interesting, especially because the military is interested in PTSD. You send soldiers to a combat zone, they all come back traumatized, right? They have seen horrible things, they suffer. Soldiers coming from war often spend a lot of time removing the psychological effects of war from themselves. So, and you know that military has always been the main driver behind artificial intelligence applications. In the US, the early neural network studies, etc., all were funded by DARPA, the defense agency. So it's very difficult to decouple AI from military. And that's also part of the ethical gray zone is coming in. The difficulty of clinical applications is that your assessment is typically not valid in a clinical sense. So you have to perform independent studies or much wider studies to get clinical validity. But there are some examples in which these technologies are incorporated into devices like Empatica, for example, or Affectiva, you know, these companies that they're producing sensor systems that can help you with diagnosing sleep quality or depression, things like that. Longitudinal analysis is especially important for aging societies. If, for example, in Japan, there are a lot of old people who are not contributing to the economy, and it's very expensive to take care of them in a healthcare facility. So what you want is to improve their conditions at the home environment, and you create smart homes. If a person falls down and breaks a leg in the home environment, the system should notice this and alert a doctor or someone who would come and give healthcare. Or if a person is getting worse in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, you want to detect these things automatically. Training and simulation are important. We can train new experts with simulated studies. We can also create technologies like the one I showed you for rehabilitation, the kids with cerebral palsy. This is another application we did with a Now robot. I understand that you guys have some Nows in the lab. So this was a fitness coach for elderly people. We were taking this coach to an elderly care facility near the university, and the Now is exercising with the elderly. So it says, you know, raise your hands, you know, do this, do that, this kind of thing. And it can also detect the postures and the gestures of the elderly and then give corrective feedback. You can say, open your hands wider, you know, no, you're doing this wrong, use your other feet, use your other hand, things like that. So this is interesting because a real fitness coach is expensive to get, and this now can regularly give training. But there are also downsides. These fitness sessions are also social sessions for the elderly. They like to have the human touch. They don't like the Now to give them one-to-one coaching. Even if it's a better exercise, it's not social enough. So user studies give you a good understanding of what your customers expect from your technology. And typically your assumptions may be wrong, especially if you're working with elderly. Some time ago we got my grandmother a phone with the large buttons. She just threw it on our faces, said, yeah, I'm not old, what do you think you are? Who do you think you are? I'm gonna use the latest iPhone and that's it. Okay. Then she spent hours trying to figure out how it works. You know, she's sweating, but she wants to be young, so she doesn't want to use this old technology. There are a lot of methodological issues. There is a language gap when you're working with social scientists, with doctors, with psychologists. They don't understand your perspective. They don't understand what you say. We're going to train this model. They have no idea what training means in that context. And you don't understand their language. You don't understand what they say. This is not significant, for example. The model complexity is an issue. There are differences between qualitative and quantitative analysis. And it's very easy to do pseudoscience. You can have a small data set and you can build a machine learning system that memorizes the data set, and you can say, I can recognize deception 95%. That's pseudoscience. In real life, it will not work at all. So it's not something relevant. There are also racial and other biases. You build a system to recognize facial expressions. You train it on the IMDb database, a lot of Hollywood stars. You come to India, it doesn't work. You go to China, it doesn't work. Because you don't have enough facial morphology from the local population, it will not work. Explainability is now an issue. You build a system for a doctor, and the system gives a decision, but why that decision? Its system now needs to explain the decision to the doctor so that it can be more useful, right? So we're also working on these things. So one case study is this affect analysis in play therapy. Normally, the doctors use something called the child play therapy instruments, like a questionnaire, to assess affect in these things. It's a natural setting, so it's a 1 hour play setting, very natural. The kid is not wearing any sensors. There are a few cameras in the corners, but it's a noisy environment. You see the face of the child maybe 10% of the time from a single camera, because the child is rotating all the time. The illumination is not frontal and ideal. There are a lot of occlusions. Computationally, there are a lot of challenges. This is the kind of room setting. Maybe it's not very visible, but we collect data from 52 children, 270 hours of video, and then we try to analyze this with our tools. So I'll show you the framework a little bit. Can you read this in the back? Probably not, right? It's very small. But so what we do is we have the labeled transcripts of the sessions and the videos. So we have a natural language processing pipeline. We do text analysis on the transcripts, and we do video effect analysis on the videos. And for the videos, we have a face analysis module and then a body analysis. So we also analyze the skeleton. Because if the child is excited, you can see it in the skeleton. He moves a lot, for example. So here you see how open pose works. It fits these skeletons to these body poses. And we enhance its results with some outlier detection, Kalman filtering, detection and tracking. We have a deep neural network-based model to look at the faces. The details are not important, but it gives us an emotion label for every frame. And then we have an optical flow-based skeleton analysis to combine it with. And then we have a text analysis module. And now if you're working with English language, there are a lot of affect analysis tools out there, but we're working with Turkish. So then it's difficult. I'm sure also it's difficult for Indian, the Hindi or the different languages in India, because you also have a lot of different languages. So you have to think about what kind of natural language processing tools you can deploy for this kind of problem. I'll skip some of the things, but just show you the results. We can detect anxiety by looking at the child's face, but sometimes we need to look at the therapist's face as well, because it's an interaction, so the therapist mimics or shows the expressions. If the child is happy, you can see the pleasure in the therapist's face as well. So what the conclusions from this kind of study is that automatic analysis tools can give you good insights. And it can also give you ways of quantifying the information, right? So at the end of the session, the psychologist will give a survey, but it's only at the end. With this kind of thing, I can do a second-by-second annotation of the whole session, and I can see the affect changes. Here the child is happy, here he is angry, here he is okay, here he is frustrated, right? So I can do a much more detailed analysis of the sessions. I can also look at the synchrony and mimicry between the therapist and the child, and I can tell whether it's a good interaction or not. So what we do is we explore the benefits of multimodality. We look at the face, the body pose, the transcripts, the voice, and we let them compensate for each other. But when we do the analysis, we start from the simplest modality and then add more modalities. I'm not going to talk about the bipolar example. I think this is not very important at this stage. But let me show you this one slide. This is Shapley value analysis. Now we have tools to analyze for explainability which features were important for your analysis. So your model gives you something. In this case, it tells you that your patient is in a high state of mania. And then you use this Shapley value analysis. It tells you which features are most important in the analysis. And here I can see, for example, the text features are important. And in the text I have different categories. Religion is an important category. Why is religion an important category? Because some of our patients, when they are in manic state, they go into religious fervor. They talk about God all the time because they are detached from reality. So you can detect this automatically now, okay, with your machine learning system. And the system can also tell you, I believe this is a manic patient because of the text features are loading, you know, a lot of religious text here. I think this guy is in a manic state. So, final words, final slide. Social and effective computing has matured to a point. Now we are we're able to do a lot of different applications, and we're also able to commercialize some of these applications. And however, if you want to commercialize them, you have to test them very extensively. You have to collaborate with hospitals, with clinics. You have to do a lot of user studies in different places. And there is a lot of comorbidity between mental health care situations. So once you develop a technology for depression, you can probably also use it for PTSD, schizophrenia, ADHD. So core technologies are useful across the board. That's why this area is at the moment, you know, rapidly expanding. There are a lot of applications. Some of my collaborators, students in the group, and funding resources, acknowledging them. And here is my email address and Twitter handle. So if you have any questions about any of the things I have shown you, please do not hesitate to send me an email and ask about it. I will be very happy to share with you papers or ideas or comments about anything that you might be interested in. Thank you very much. I stop here and maybe we'll have some time for questions.